conflict. So I will tell you where everything started, where it actually began. So for everything there is a geopolitical scenario. The geopolitical scenario, this is the European map. This is European map. That part of Russia is called as Asia and this part of Europe is called as Russia. So this part of Europe, why? Because Europe, the Russia is a very large. 30% of the Russia belongs to Europe and 70% of the Russia belongs to Asia. So in this particular part, the Russia want to have its influence on the Europe. The Russia want to have influence on the Europe. But accidentally what happened? Ukraine till 2019, there was a ruler, there was a president of Ukraine who was a puppet to the Russia. Till 2019, there is no issue with respect to Ukraine. Why? Because the Ukraine earlier former president was a puppet for Russia. So the Russia was happy because of the Ukrainian rule. Why? Because Ukrainian ruler was a puppet for Russia. Then in 2019, elections happened. In that election, the present president of Ukraine was anti-Russia and the people are also anti-Russians. Then this person, 2019, the Russian president has been, the Ukrainian president has been escaped to Russia. From that time onwards, there was a cold war between the Ukraine and Russia. From that moment onwards, there is a cold war between the Russia. Before that, what happened? There is a small place, a peninsular place which is called as Crimea. In this Crimea, the people want to be part of the Russia and the Ukraine want to make this Crimea to the part of Ukraine. In 2014, a war-like situation happened and a referendum was being conducted in Crimea and the people of Crimea accepted that I will be staying with Russia. So the Crimea became part of Russia. Then this Ukraine is very angry on this. Why? Because the Ukrainian land Crimea was being taken away by Russia. So it is looking for the opportunity. And what is the opportunity for the Ukraine is to join with European Union, to join with the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO, which is a group of 30 countries, which was been established after Second World War. A military bloc of North American continent as well as European continent is NATO. So this Ukraine want to take revenge on the Russia and it want to go away from the Russia towards the west, towards NATO bloc. So they want to join the European Union and they want to join the NATO. So the Russia is completely rejecting the idea. Why? Why? Because historically the Ukraine is part and parcel of Russia. Historically, Ukraine is part and parcel of Russia and the ethnic people who are living in Ukraine are also Russians, who have a common agenda with Russo kingdom, which have a common ethnic feeling with, which have a common kingdom called as Russo kingdom, and the Russo kingdom was a part of USSR. The Ukrainian was part of USSR. From that, because of that ethnic feeling, because of that colonial mindset, the Russia think that the Ukraine is part of Russia. Ukraine cannot have independent policy. Ukraine cannot have sovereignty. Ukraine cannot have autonomy. Ukraine should follow what the Russia is telling. But from 2019, what is happening because of the new president for Ukraine? No, we are anti-Russian, we are sovereign country, we are autonomous country. Why our policy should be determined by the Russians? Why our foreign policy should be determined by Russians? Who is Russia to determine that I should be part of European Union or not? I should be part of North Atlantic Treaty Organization or not? So the Ukrainian demand is, we want autonomy, we want a sovereign, we are independent nation. Why we have to follow the policy made by the Russia? We will make our own policy. The 71% of the Ukrainians also want to be away from Russia. 71% of the Ukrainian population also want to be away from the Russia. But Ukrainians want to divide. Ukrainians want to come away with Russia. But the Russia want this Ukraine should not move towards the West. Ukraine should not move towards European Union. Ukraine should not move towards NATO. Then what happened? If you see the bombing, the present bombings are happening here, mapping Russian attacks across Ukraine. If you see, this part is not bombed. This part is not bombed because these are the two territories. These are the two territories in which the Russia had already declared independence. Russia has already declared independence and they are pro-Russians. So the bombings are not happening in the eastern part and the bombings are not happening in the Crimea, but the bombings are happening in the western part. The bombings are happening in the western Ukraine. Why? Because this western Ukrainian want to become part of the West but not become the part of Russia. Here the bombings are happening. So here comes everything. Between the Russian President Vladimir Putin and another person who is Vladimir, almost same. Because of their common ethnicity, the names are also same. Kiev, Moscow, and the Kremlin, the Parliament of Russia, the Parliament of Russia and the Moscow has been decided that we are going to bomb on Kiev. So why the Russia want to bomb? I will give you some points. What are the reasons behind present war? What is happening in Ukraine and Russia? Major thing is Jan 2021, Ukraine urged US to let it join NATO. So in 2021 January, openly the Ukrainian president told to the United States of America, please let me join in NATO. This has created ruckus. This has created a benefit of doubt among the Russians, mainly this person called as Vladimir Putin. So you want to tilt towards United States of America. You want to move towards West. You want to move towards NATO. So from January 2021 it is happening. And day before yesterday it bombarded in the form of bombs. The second thing, Ukrainians' appeal made Russia angry. This Ukrainian appeal, please join us in NATO, please join us in European Union. This had made Russia angry. So Ukrainian model of joining NATO as well as European Union has aggrieved Russia. But that is correct only. Why? Because when we see from the point of autonomy, sovereign country, Ukraine is sovereign country, it have its own independent foreign policy. If our foreign policy is determined by Pakistan, whether we will get angry or not. If our foreign policy is determined by America, whether we will get angry or not. In the same way, the Ukrainian people and the Ukrainian president is getting angry. Who are you to determine our foreign policy? We are independent, sovereign, autonomous country which is recognized by the United Nations Organization as well as the world countries. Who are you to tell me I should join NATO or? So the Ukrainian concern is also genuine, but Russia is telling, with colonial mindset, the Russia is telling that from the last 500, 600 years, Ukraine is part and parcel of Russia and the United USSR is against West. Now you want to move and join with West. We are not going to accept it. We don't want any American influence in European soil. We don't want any NATO influence in American soil, in Ukrainian soil, in erstwhile USSR countries. Here the situation got worsened off. Russia deployed and trained troops near Ukraine. Near Ukraine, the troops were being deployed. Now they are ready for the war. Russia resists Ukraine's tilt towards NATO and European Union. Then the Russian President Vladimir Putin was been asked in an interview, sir, what should be the condition you will be withdrawing the troops? When you will stop the war? I have conditions. First condition is, Ukraine should make a legally binding agreement that never in the future they will try to join. A legally binding bond. A bond should be written by the Ukraine that in future they should not attempt to join the NATO. Number two, NATO should also make a bond that I will not join Ukraine. So I will not allow Ukraine to join us. Number three, demilitarization of Ukraine. Ukraine should not have any military force. Ukraine should not have any military force. Ukraine should have a peace. Absence of complete military. For your military, we are going to support. Russia want to tell that. If you want any military support, Russia will give you military support. But you should demilitarized. These are the three conditions which are put forward by Russian President Vladimir Putin in order to stop war against Ukraine. Why any independent country will keep quiet? If India will keep quiet, if some country come to India and tell that, hey, don't maintain relationship with China. Who are you to tell me? Already I got independence from you. Already we divided long back in 1991 when the disintegration of USSR happened. So I am an independent sovereign country, I have my own power to make my own policies. But you are making to follow you. Why I should follow? In Europe, the Ukrainian concern is genuine. Why? Because it's a sovereign independent country. Russia is telling that, but historically we are the persons who have been ruling the Ukrainian, now also I want to rule. But now the world has been changed. Now that imperialistic mindset, the colonialistic mindset will not work today. Why? Because the mindset of the people has been changed. The world has been changed towards development, the world has been changed toward welfare, the world has been changed towards peaceful coexistence. There is no mindset for imperialism, there is no mindset for colonialism. Then how you Russia, you are having the mindset of imperialism is, but the Russian President Vladimir Putin concern is also genuine. His fear is if it enters into Ukraine, it will not stop. It enters into Belarus, it enters into Lithuania, it enters into Latvia, it enters into Estonia, it enters into Romania, it enters into Bulgaria. In that way they will make their influence and Russia will become powerless. That is the fear of Russia. If I allow them for time being, they will stabilize. He told the story also, Vladimir Putin. What story he told? He told the story of a camel. Camel will come first into the tent, I will keep my legs. So you will come and you will keep your legs into the Ukraine. Okay, if I allow you, you will tell that I will keep my back. If I allow you, then I will tell that I will keep my head also. I will allow you, then you will tell the tent is mine. This is a story which is told by Vladimir Putin in the media. So the concern of Putin is also correct, but we should not forget that Ukraine is an independent sovereign country which have its own preamble, which have its own constitution. They have their own people who are educated, literates. They can make their own decision, they can choose their own president. Ukraine's tilt towards NATO could strengthen US hold in Europe. That is the fear of Russia. Putin says if Ukraine joined NATO, it might recapture Crimea. So what in 2014 was being handed over to Russia, if Ukraine allows or if Ukraine keeps hands with the US as well as European Union as well as NATO, they will recapture Crimea. And Russia is feared, this gentleman is feared that his hold on the region might lose. The Russian hold on the erstwhile USSR might loosen and the West might occupy the gap. So the Russia might become powerless. Why? Because it will not have its influence on this Ukrainian, Belarus, Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia countries. A legal pledge that Ukraine won't join NATO. Agreement, bond paper. Like a bond paper between a wife and husband, we both going to stay together, this is my bond paper. We don't know, this is a foreign policy. This is a foreign policy today, till 2019 close friends Ukraine and Russia, today they are on war. We cannot believe what happens in foreign policy. 2019 close friends, 2022 they are fighting like anything. Ukraine must demilitarize and become neutral. There should not be any military force and it should become neutral. And this thing is telling that, I am telling that, the Putin is telling that you don't be towards Russia also, but at the same time you don't also be with NATO. You be neutral. If you be neutral also, no problem for me. But the problem is demilitarize. If I demilitarize, if any country, Pakistan also can attack Ukraine and they can get the power. Why? Because Ukraine doesn't have. NATO must deploy strike weapons near Russia's border, it is telling that. And if NATO bombs on the Russian border, the situation is going to be worse. If you want to protect the Ukraine, you go away, automatically we will protect Ukraine. But what happened on the real ground, on the battlefield, USA, European Union, NATO gave nice hand. No one is supporting now Ukraine. Ukraine became alone. what the Ukrainian president told in the yesterday's media conference. He told that we are alone. I am going to give the weapons to the citizens. See, within 1 month, the drastic change. Now the citizens are going to carry the weapons. Now we should protect ourselves. Every citizen will be given with arms and ammunition. Go and join the war. So this is the story of Ukraine versus Russia. The fear is, the main fear of Putin is the influence of US, NATO might increase in Ukraine, eventually in the erstwhile USSR territories in the region, and they recapture Crimea. The power of the Putin, the power of the Russia might come down. If I compromise now, I have to compromise for long term. The Putin want to tell that if I compromise now, I am going to compromise forever. Hence, we are not going to compromise. If compromise is required, Ukraine will compromise. That is the reason we are bombing on Ukraine. But in this context, if anyone asks my opinion is every independent country have its autonomy. Every sovereign country have the power to determine their own foreign policy. Who are the friends? Who are the enemies? Other country, external country doesn't have any role to play with respect to who are going to be my friends and who are going to be my enemies. So in this context, the Ukraine aspirations of Ukraine are genuine, but the aspirations of Russian presidents are not genuine. Why? Because the aspirations of Russian president is colonialistic mindset, imperialistic mindset. Why? Because once upon a time I ruled Ukraine, now also you should follow me. The same thing can be applied into India. If British come to India and tell that, you India, I ruled you, now also you should listen to me. If not, I am going to bomb on India. Then what India would do? India would abide by it, or India would retaliate. The same thing is happening with Ukraine now. Russia, British, I ruled your country for 200 years and you are my colony. Now again I am coming, listen to me. Whether India is going to listen? No. The same thing there. Once upon a time Ukraine is part of Russia, you should also listen to me today as well. So the conflict of Russia and Ukraine is not of today's, it is having historical significance. From 9th century onwards, the kingdom, once upon a time the Ukraine was very powerful than Russia. Why? Because the kings and the kingdoms are from Kiev. But now the situation is becoming worse. The world leaders should come forward. The prices will increase, the inflation will increase. The war should come to an end. If not, if the NATO enters, if the European Union enters, the Putin and the Russia will get more aggrieved. The situation will become more worse. We don't know what will happen by the month of April. So it's a right situation that the world leader called all the leaders of the Ukraine and the Russia and make the situation amicably solve it. This is about Ukraine, Russia, present story.